This, my friends, is the best clone in history. It's better than this clone, definitely better than this clone, and it's not as good as these. So Chinese companies have really nailed the art of cloning. I don't mean like Dolly the sheep that you just saw, I mean like cloning things that are products. This is the Elegoo Centauri Carbon. It is a $300 printer that borrows heavily from the Bambu P1S, which is much more expensive, and it still manages to get some features into it that Bambu didn't, and it costs $200 less than the P1S. What I think is just insane is that the standard version of the Centauri, which doesn't print carbon fiber filaments, is only $200. That model is sold out as of this recording, and you can see why, but it's by far the best value in 3D printing. In fact, the Centauri Carbon costs less than the original Bambu P1P printer, despite running circles around it features-wise. For these parts, one of them was printed on the P1S and one was on the Centauri. Can you tell which it is? I can't. Literally, I cannot tell. I put them both in a box for a customer order, and I do not remember which was which, and I cannot tell them apart. The Centauri has that same look as Bambu, the same blazing speed, same enclosed design, and in my experience, after hundreds of hours of printing, the results are just as impressive. Elegoo didn't just mimic the internals, they clearly cloned the entire enclosure. Glass doors, top-mounted lids, sealed frame. That makes it look sleek, and it makes it look a lot like the P1S, but there is one little catch. The Bambu P1S has a reputation for those glass doors shattering upon impact. I've seen so many pictures of people getting their Bambu printers with the doors having shattered in transit. Of course, where it really matters is speed and print quality, and the Centauri Carbon absolutely delivers on both. Travel speed is rated up to 500 millimeters per second, and when compared to the P1S, prints came out at nearly the same time. Some of them were faster on the Bambu, some of them on the Elegoo. It really seemed to depend on the model and the slicing. In order to handle more exotic filaments, the hot end is rated to 320 degrees Celsius. The heat bed also goes up to 110 degrees Celsius or about 250 Fahrenheit. There's no heater in the system, so the regulation isn't as good as a heated chamber, but with the doors closed, the heat of the print head still provides some benefits for higher temperature filaments. Inside the printer, there's a filter that Elegoo says absorbs VOCs and odors. It's a subtle difference, but I haven't really noticed it, and you still don't want to print in a shared small space, an office or a bedroom or something like that. Plastic is plastic. It doesn't matter if you filter it first, it's still plastic. So with connectivity, we also have some good news. The Centauri Carbon supports both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So in my studio, I used to have a separate network, one for 2.4 gigahertz devices like my printers, and one for 5 gigahertz for my computers and other fast things in my house. Since this has 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, you don't have to worry about that. You can hop onto any Wi-Fi network and start printing online. It also does over-the-air firmware updates, so you never have to copy files and put them on a thumb drive again. That was by far one of the biggest problems with the Neptune series. If there was a new firmware update, you had to use both the thumb drive to update the printer and then also use a micro SD card and take apart the controller in order to upgrade that, and people just did not understand how to do that. The Centauri Carbon has 8 gigabytes of onboard storage. That's great for me as I run a print farm and I can just call up a file to print from the history interface on the controller. The Centauri Carbon is supported directly in Orca. You can slice the files there and upload them directly to your printer if the printer is connected to your network. All you need to know is the IP address of your printer, but that's available in the settings page on the menus of the printer. Unlike some of the printers in Orca, Orca can connect to the printer for full control of the features and for monitoring your print. It's not as nice of an interface as Bambu Slicer is, but everything you need is there. There's also no cloud-based printing, so you can't start a print while you're out of town or like I do sometimes in a plane, and that means there's no interface to access printable models like you can with Bambu in the phone app. Now what you can do is use a solution like Octo Anywhere to make the printer connected to the wider network so you can control it remotely, but that's an add-on cost and it's a little bit of a hassle setting that up. And oh yeah, the Elegoo has no app at all right now, but since you can see the interface by entering your IP address in a browser, you have access to it at home. Now when it comes to the interface, Elegoo didn't copy that, they improved it. The Centauri's large full-color touchscreen is responsive and bright and well organized. It is a huge upgrade over the P1S's monochrome menu system. Everything that you need, settings, print control, tuning, is intuitive and easy to reach, and you don't need a phone app for basic tasks. Whenever I'm trying to configure the P1S, I stand there with the app running while I'm next to the P1S, because the app is so much easier to use than the menu, but standing there to use a phone to use your printer is really annoying. There's also a camera inside the printer just like the P1S has, but Elegoo's is sharper with better contrast and smoother refresh. If you're watching prints over your network, this can make a big difference. I have one big problem with this, and I think I'm going to modify my printer to solve it. So my one big gripe is the filament path. And it's a pretty big gripe. There's a really tight bend in the PTFE tube that makes loading difficult. Sometimes the filament just doesn't load, even after you see the filament in the spool being taken up. The problem is that the bend is so severe that the printing filament doesn't always go up and then come back down again properly. I had a few prints that didn't exactly fail, they just didn't print because the filament wasn't all the way to the print head, and so it never got pulled in fully to the extruder. Another big miss right now, compared to Bambu, is the lack of any multi-material system. The side-mounted filament spool makes the printer take up more space than a system you can just place on top of the printer, and it is a huge pain to load and unload filament on the side of the printer when you're changing colors between jobs. Now, Elegoo is definitely coming out with their own multi-material system, which I think should be here in about the third quarter of 2025. But until that ships, if you need multi-material printing, spring on the extra price of the P1S. And if you want to see all the things that a multi-material system can do other than different colors, you can check out my video on that right here. By far, the Elegoo Centauri Carbon is the most complete $300 printer I have used. It gives you what the Bambu P1S offers for much less. It gives you the same print speed, the same quality, the same enclosure design, but it adds a better screen, better camera, better Wi-Fi compatibility, all for a few $100s less. In fact, if I was a single color printer right now, I would get this over the Bambu A1. Why? Because as good as the A1 is, it's still moving that bed back and forth, which is more prone to failure than a bed that moves up and down. It's definitely not perfect. There's no cloud ecosystem, no AMS yet, but the fundamentals are all here and it prints beautifully. Okay, so what do you think? A $300 printer that has all these features, is that for you? Are you a wait and see person, or are you a, well, I'm just going to go with the things that have been out for a couple of years because they're already established? What do you think about this printer? Also, if you have any questions about it, leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer the questions. And if you're finding this helpful, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons wherever they are on your screen so that we can do more tech reviews like this one. For Dave Tries This, I'm David Schloss, and as always, thanks so much for giving this a try.